YouTube. Welcome to my fly tying station. My name is Mike. I appreciate you stopping by, and I hope you get something out of this. Next week I've made plans to go up to the eastern Sierra Nevadas to do a little float tube fishing on the lakes. I might do some creek fishing and river fishing, but mostly float tubing. So I decided, well, I'll take my new Tenkara fishing system. Now, I bought this about a year ago. I've used it local, but I've never had it into the Sierras or even on a float tube. So I thought I'd really give it a workout this time. Now, if I'm going to take the Tenkara system, I might as well tie some Tenkara flies. They're a lot different than Western or normal flies that I'm used to. They're quite a bit different. So I'm going to go the whole route. Now, this Tenkara, for those that's never heard of it like I was a year ago, this is a Japanese system, and this system goes back hundreds of years. Shogun days type thing, and it's a simple form of fishing. What makes it simple is there's no reel. There's the rod, there's the line, and there's the fly, and that's about as simple as you can get. So I thought I'd tie some flies today. Now, when I tie flies, I like to set everything up, get all the feathers, the threads, everything that I need, and tie 5 in a row. Now, I may change ribbing from gold to silver or something, but basically it'll be the same thing, and I'll do them one after another. And it's funny that the 5th fly I tie is always quicker and better than the first fly I tie, so I guess there's something in practice. Now, I never heard of Tenkara, but I kind of did back in the early 60s, when I was just a lad. My grandfather would come up from the valley fishing. We lived in the mountains. He'd come up for the valley fishing. And he had a friend named Yoshi. Now, I don't know, Yoshi, if it's his first name, last name, short for another name and nickname. We just called him Yoshi or Yosh. Most of the time just Yosh. But the first time, now, we called people that came up in droves on hunting season and fishing season, we called them flatlanders, because they'd do some crazy stuff. They'd get lost, or they'd hike in 10 miles and run out of gas before they were halfway back, or they'd light a barbecue in their camper and asphyxiate themselves, and geez. And the fishermen would come up and they'd have like 5 hooks on a leader, a hot dog, chicken liver, salmon eggs, a night crawler, and if any of those didn't work, they'd take one off, put some cheese or a mealworm, or it was never ending, and we got kind of a kick out of that. So when my grandfather brought this Japanese gentleman up, Yoshi, it was a new sight to us. Now, I don't want anybody to think I'm making fun of the Japanese, or especially Yoshi, because Yoshi, I only met him like 10 times in my life, if that. But he taught me a lot, and I really liked the man a lot. I liked the man. And I was just a kid, 10 or 11. And he came to about here on my dad. Where most people came here, my dad was always a head above everything, but this guy was not too much bigger than me at 11. And he'd always call me Mr. Mike. Hey, Mr. Mike, you ready to go fishing? We catch lots of fish today, Mr. Mike. And he was just the happiest. I've never seen anybody that was so anti-negative. He was always happy, and everything was funny to him, and all this stuff. So we get out to the dam. Me and my friend are setting up, and he picks a spot, and he puts on this like judo thing. It's like a judo rope, but it's not It's like silk. It's not heavy like a judo robe and a belt. And he puts that on. And then he puts this bandana or something around his head, you know, this white thing that has Japanese writing on it. And then he brings out this, takes off the truck, this, I thought it was 40 foot long, but it's probably 15 foot long. But just one 15-foot rod with line tied to the end of it. And we look at this can't be real, you know. And then we watch it, he'd flick that out there, and you know, talking in his own, you know, and we're going, what the heck? Well, is this the candid camera or what? And so we get to fishing. About an hour and a half later, Yoshi's got 3 or 4 fish. We've got nothing. So finally I say, boy, Yoshi, you really picked the right spot. He said, oh yeah, good spot, Mr. Mike, good spot. You want trade sites? And I go, heck yeah. So he comes over here and we go over there, and hour later or so, he's got 2 or 3 fish, and we got 1 fish to get between us all, and it wasn't even my fish. And I'm starting to really wonder about it. And that's how Yosh was every time he came up, he caught fish. I mean, he was unbelievable. So finally, one day, I go, geez, Yosh, what's the secret of catching fish? He said, oh, Mr. Mike, it's not what you think. And I go, what do you mean? He says, reel don't matter, rod don't matter, bait don't matter. And I said, reel, rod, and bait don't matter. He says, fish don't care what rod or what reel you have. They don't even know. All they know is how to eat. The secret to catching fish is pleasantation. That's what it is, Mike. Pleasantation. And I go, oh, pleasantation. That's what you got to do. I had no clue to what it was. So that night when my dad gets home, you know, I sit there and hey, Dad, you know, Yoshi's he's a pretty good fisherman. And my dad goes, best I've ever seen. You know, I'm going, my dad thinks this guy's the best he's ever seen? I mean, Yoshi must even be better than I thought. I mean, my dad criticizes all fishermen. My dad would always go, see what that fisherman's doing over there right now? See how he's doing that? Don't do that. That's stupid. You know, he criticized every fisherman. So when he say best I ever said, I started really gaining respect for Yosh. And so I said, well, Yoshi, he says the secret is pleasantation. How do you do pleasantation? my dad, he kind of smiles. He says, well, you know, Yosh has, you know, he has some problems with his R's and L's sometimes. So I think what Yoshi meant was it's presentation. It's presenting the bait to the fish. Presentation. I go, oh, and I start laughing. Ha! Presentation, that's funny. And then my mother, you know, my mother always this way, and in my face. And you always knew she was really ticked off because she would say, young man, or listen you. That was her good one. Listen you, listen you. And I'm going, God, what did I get? What did I do? And she says, let me hear you say the secret to fishing is presentation in Japanese. I don't speak Japanese. She goes, well, then let me hear you say it in Spanish. I can't speak Spanish. And she says, well, you know, Yoshi can communicate in all three of those languages, and you have no right to laugh at somebody when they're far superior in something than you are. I mean, she really got ticked off at me, and I'm thinking, what did I do? I wasn't laughing at Yoshi. I was laughing at the word. And she says, well, when you go ha ha ha, that's laughing. So, you know, so I learned one thing that day, not to laugh at Yoshi's vocabulary or whatever. But anyway, my dad settled it down, and he says, you know, that's an easy word, presentation, but it's something that you can understand in 15, 20 minutes. But it's something that's going to actually can take you a lifetime to master, And I was confused. What do you mean, Pop? And he says, well, presentation, you know, it's number one, where's the fish? So you've got to learn eddies and riffles and boulders and rocks and bushes, whether it's light, whether it's overcast, whether it's cold, whether it's hot, and you've got to put all these things together. And so he says, when you're fishing, when you get a strike, note it. Where in the riffle is it? Where in the eddy is it? What is it, under a branch? Is it near a branch? And you've got to put all those things together, so the next time you see some area that's similar, you know right where to go. That's called presentation, son. Oh man, this fishing's starting to sound complicated, Dad. And he said, well, that's the beauty of fishing. You know, it can be not complicated at all, and you might catch a few fish, or it can be very, very complicated, and you catch a lot of fish like Yosh. Fish, and you pick and choose what you want. But if you want to be a good fisherman, you got to know all these little ins and out details that most people don't know or even care about. So if you want to be a good fisherman like Yoshi, practice presentation. So that was the end of that lecture. But Yoshi was, he knew how to fish. He knew how to fish. You know, maybe I shouldn't talk about this part, but another thing that Yoshi taught me that was, you know, unbelievable. You know, we lived in the mountains. We didn't have TV. So when I went down to visit my grandparents, you know, they had TV. And my dad was watching a show called World at War. It was a 1950s or 60s show. Now, I was, I was 11, so I don't know, what's that, 5th grade, 6th grade, something in there, I don't even remember. But, you know, I heard of World War II, but nothing really big on it. And this documentary was on the Japanese going into China and like the rape of Nanking or something. And I saw all these people getting shot down, you know. I never seen anything like that, you know. And I'm going, wow. And then I kept watching this, you know. It went through that Hirohito was a god, and these kamikazes would fly these planes down and crash them with themselves in. I'm going, whoa, you know. And then I said, isn't Yoshi Japanese, Dad? And he said, he sure is. I go, well, boy, I'm glad Yoshi's not like that. And he goes, well, I am too. But Yoshi was like that, you know. This was the early 60s, so the war was like 15 years before, you know. And he says, yeah, Yoshi got captured. He was, I think, a Marine. I'm not sure. But my dad thought he must have been an officer because they didn't shoot. They captured him, you know. And I go, oh, this doesn't sound like the Yosh I know, Dad, you know. And he says, listen, son, That was 15 years ago. It was a war. He thought he had to do what he had to do. We thought we had to do what we had to do. It's over. It's done. Let it be. Some people don't like to talk about war, so just don't even bring it up to him. You know, have a little respect for him. Well, you know, a kid. I couldn't believe it. You know, I mean, he was just so much different. He was such a happy. It was just so much different from that war documentary, you know. And so one day we were out fishing, and right out of the blue, I got to talk to Yoshi. So I go, "Hey Yosh, did you really believe?" I think the guy's name's Hirohito, the emperor. Do you really believe that the emperor was a god? And I mean, at that instant, I was 11. Now, I hadn't grown up to see, you know, war weary yet, but I knew that something. I mean, he sank down and his eyes sunk in, and I mean, he just changed. I mean, 180 degrees. I'm going, wow. At 11, I said, I pushed a button, and he says. Finally looks at me, and he's not happy or using that accent or anything. He's very calm, and he goes, you probably don't understand that, do you, Mike? And I go, well, I'm using my father's language here, and I told this to Yosh. I said, well, my dad once told me that if a man takes a shit every day, that means that he's no better or no worse than you are. You know, whatever he is, he made himself that way, or he let somebody else make him that way, whether it be good or whether it be bad. You know, so I was thinking about that, and I was going, boy, but geez, you know, I can't believe that, you know, that a guy could be, you know, a god. A man could be a god. And I was just, Yoshi just seems so much more intelligent than that. And so he looks at me, he says, and this is something I'll never forget. He looks at me, he says, you know, Mikey, when your mother, your father, your uncles, your preachers, your school teachers, your government leaders, when they all tell you something, it becomes true, as real as real. And it was real because we had no freedom of speech. You cannot have truth, Mikey, without freedom of speech. Freedom of speech and truth are one unit. They can't be anything else. If we would have had freedom of speech, it might have been different. But we didn't, so we believed in things that weren't true. You'll find, Mikey, as you grow up, that one of the best things about man is that he can learn anything. He can learn anything. That's a great advantage. But also, the worst thing about man is he can learn anything. So we've got to have the truth so people can know right from wrong. And when the human creature starts having problems with knowing right from wrong, good from evil, then we've got even more problems than we have had. Ooh, that was a scary thought, wasn't it? But that was what Yoshi taught me. He taught me a lot about life, a lot about human frailties, and he taught me a lot about good and evil, really, because I know that Yoshi was a good guy. And I told him one time, he said to me, he says, you know, Mike, I deserved to die in that war. I should have died in that war. I deserved it. And you know, I didn't like that as 11. I thought he was a good guy, and I told him, I said, you know, Yosh, maybe my dad was your enemy once and you were his enemies once, but my dad says leave it be. It's in the past. Let's look forward. So you'll never be an enemy to me, and I'm glad you made it through the war. You're teaching me how to fish. So that made Yoshi happy again. He got back to his bubbly own self, and I look back on my memories with Yoshi a lot. So the man did me good. Let's tie some flies. Let's get out of this and tie a fly or two. Okay, let's tie a Tenkara Fly. I'm going to be using red thread it's silk thread that I got from, I think it's Joann's Crafts or something. And then this is ultra thread, black. We'll be using the whip finisher, and then we're going to use a feather. We'll be using the saddle hackle, rooster hackle, dyed black. I don't think, you know, rooster's that black, but it might be a non-dyed feather. But I'll make a few dark and a few light and stuff like that. We'll need the bodkin, and we will also need the scissors, the small scissors. Other than that, we're ready to rock and roll. I'm going to start by using the black thread. Now this is a number 14 with a down eye, and I'm going to start it. Now it might look 3 inches wide to you, but it's very small. So I'm going to start this with a nice base. I'm going to go down to the end to the curve, and then I'm going to come up several times. And I'm going to snip the thread. And I am going to take the feather. And I'm going to tie the quill. Here's the feather and the quill. So I'm going to tie the quill on, and I'm going to use the quill as a body. And then I'm going to start wrapping the body. Now I've just peeled the feathers off this, and I'm just guessing how much it's going to take before I run out. When I get here, I'm going to use the hackle pliers. One more. So I'll tighten this up. I'm going to go through the hackle and tie it down. Right about there. Good. I like that. Now I'm going to use the red thread. Okay, now I'm going to try to tie a little red thread in here if I can. Tighten it right down, nice and thick. Now we'll take the red and we'll make a few wraps with the red. Why I put the red in is from my grandfather. He taught me this, that if you add a little red, and if you look at my other video on his flies that he made, every fly's got a little red in it. And his philosophy was, to a fish, red means blood, and blood means a wound, and a wound means easy lunch. Now, I'm not sure that that's perfectly true. Fish may be colorblind for all I know, but Grandpa told me that, and I believe it. Yeah, you remember, humans can learn anything, right or wrong. Okay, I'm going to do a quick whip finish here. Now I'm going to put a little, just a little, not much, of the UV on it. Just a little. The UV will give it a lot more strength when the fish so-called jumps on it. Okay, YouTube. I guess that's a Tenkara Fly. Now, why don't we call this Yoshi's Presentation? Yoshi's Presentation. I believe Yoshi's gonna catch lots of fish. So anyway, YouTube, thank you very much for stopping by, and until next time, I wish you well, and for you, Yosh, thanks for being my friend when I was a kid. You taught me a lot. Take care, everyone.